Christina and Paul had been married for 4 years, but recently Christina had changed jobs. At her previous job, she didn't have the chance to develop her career, and her salary was often late. However, her new job was much better in terms of working conditions and offered good prospects. Paul was happy for his wife because she had refused to give. She left her old job, even though she liked the team there. She also made many friends at her new job. Unfortunately, Paul's joy didn't last long. A month after starting work, Christina began to stay late at the office. It started with just half an hour, then an hour, and eventually 2 hours. At first, Paul picked her up after work, but after several, Christina was often delayed by 30 to 40 minutes. She wanted to get home on her own, as she was concerned about the extended work hours. Paul asked her if she was being compensated for the overtime. She replied that it was normal practice for newcomers in the company to gain the trust of management. She explained that the company used different programs which took more time than she was expected to complete tasks, so she had no choice but to work late. Since she was the only new employee, no one bothered her after hours, allowing her to finish her tasks safely. Despite his misgivings, Paul reluctantly agreed to the delays. He realized it was important for Christina to demonstrate her commitment to her job and her desire for long-term employment. Paul wanted to help Christina settle into her new job and prove herself from time to time. He would check on her from time to make sure she wasn't overworking herself. One evening, he decided to call her, but she didn't answer for a long time. He assumed she might have gone somewhere far away or was busy, so he ended the call after about 10 minutes. He tried calling her again. He called again, and this time she answered, sounding quite cheerful. "Honey, you're running late at work. When will you be home?" he asked. "Oh, I'm still at work. I just have one last thing to finish up. I'll be home soon," she replied. As Christina was about to hang up, there was a strange sound in the background, like an alarm clock or notification. Paul noticed it but didn't pay much attention. One of the week's highlights was when he heard similar sounds during their conversations, assuming they were computer notifications. One day after work, Paul arranged to meet with his old university friend Patrick. They agreed to meet at the mall as Patrick needed to pick something up and then grab a bite to eat. When Paul arrived, he noticed Patrick coming out of the appliance repair department. They looked really happy to see each other and said hello. Patrick told Paul, "I've finally got my smartwatch back. I felt lost without it all week." He kept on looking at his phone, showing it to Paul while they were sitting in the cafe. Paul suddenly heard the familiar beeping sound again, so he turned around to look for its source. "It's my watch," Patrick said, reassuring him. "Don't worry. You can also use it to set alarms or reminders." He turned off the sound, and Paul finally realized the source of the strange noise he had been hearing. It was puzzling, as Christina didn't have such a gadget, and she had said she was the only new employee in the office. Now Paul couldn't shake the feeling that his wife was hiding something from him. The next day, Paul decided he went to his wife's office to get a feel for the place and the people she worked with. He took a day off and went to her office. As he approached her desk and they began to converse, Paul suddenly signaled to Christina to be quiet. The familiar squeak returned, intrigued. Paul turned in the direction of the sound and noticed a man at a nearby desk. The man glanced, he looked at the screen of his smartwatch and then turned it off. Their eyes met, and Paul recognized him after carefully studying the man's face. Paul realized he had seen him before. It was the first day Paul had picked his wife up from work. Christina was getting into the car when the man came out of the business center for a smoke. Paul asked Christina about him, but she brushed him off. It seemed like he was probably someone from a neighboring office. She quickly put anyone's suspicions to rest, and Paul didn't doubt his wife for a second. She had always been truthful, but now it turned out that this person was actually a coworker. They were socializing with others near the refrigerator, joking and laughing. One of Christina's key workers was feeling challenged. Paul was approached by some of the other workers, who teased him about the new girl's husband. He laughed it off, but it made him realize that he was in a tricky situation. As the tension mounted, one of the colleagues made a suggestive remark about staying late to show Christina a new program. This made her blush and look away. Paul quickly lost his temper and got into a fight with the man, leading to a physical brawl. The workers stepped in to break up the fight and escort Paul out of the office, despite his bruises. Paul decided to end the situation. Christina, flustered and embarrassed, followed her husband outside as he walked to his car. She was overcome with worry as she looked at the wounds on Paul's face. She reached out to touch him, but pulled her hands away with force. He growled, "Tell me, did you sleep with him? Look what you've done to yourself, just admit it, Paul insisted, unwilling to back down. Tears welled up in Christina's eyes as she realized her secret was about to be revealed. She nodded slightly, covering her face with her hands. "How could you?" her husband whispered, disappointment heavy in his voice. "What did you think was going to happen?" "It's going to happen. Please forgive me." Paul was so angry he rushed to his car and drove home, figuring Christina would have enough sense not to follow him back to the apartment. However, to his surprise, she showed up on his doorstep begging for forgiveness. She offered various solutions, like quitting her job, starting a family, and taking care of him. Paul was determined to restore their once strong bond, but he found her pleas absurd and coldly ordered her to pack her bags and leave the next day. He filed for divorce. Christina took refuge with her unmarried sister, not expecting to continue her relationship with her former lover. All she wanted was to forget the painful ordeal and continue her work in peace. She didn't know that her CO worker had a reputation for having similar affairs with every new female employee. The worker had a reputation for having similar affairs with every new female employee he thought wouldn't stay with the company for long. As Christina's worries consumed her, she began to make more and more mistakes at work. Eventually, a gross error in dealing with a key client led to her termination. A moment of short-sightedness in a CO worker's ego led to the destruction of yet another family. Every day, people are surrounded by numerous temptations, but the choices they make between family and fleeting pleasure ultimately determine their future.